Good evening, everybody. Hello. Everyone, welcome to the 2024 Fireside Chat for the Environmental Law Section's Lifetime Achievement Award. I'm Gwen Hunter. I'm a member of the Executive Committee for the Environmental Law Section, and I was on the subcommittee that chose this year's award winner, Toni Cordero. We are honored to have Toni here today, along with two of her esteemed friends, Suma Pisapati and Mike Leslie, who will guide the conversation. Suma is the inaugural Environmental Justice and Community Engagement Officer at the Bay Area Air Quality Management District and is also an adjunct professor at the University of California, Berkeley School of Law. Suma and Toni have served together on the Environmental Law Section's Executive Committee for nearly 15 years. And Suma previously worked under Toni at the Attorney General's office. Toni has been Suma's longtime mentor and ally in environmental justice and diversity issues. Mike is a partner at King and Spalding, where his practice focuses on complex environmental litigation. Mike also leads the firm's Environmental Justice Initiative. Mike has known Toni since their first days at Stanford Law School together, and has been following her varied and accomplished career since then. They've been friends for decades and colleagues on the Environmental Law Section and have attended and worked on the Yosemite Conference for many years. Toni has a long list of accomplishments that I will only briefly summarize here, but I encourage you to read her bio on the conference website and attend the banquet after this to learn more. Toni is a member and former tribal chair of the coastal band of the Chumash Nation. She was with the California Attorney General's office for nearly 25 years before retiring in 2020. During her time at DOJ, Toni served as Chief of Legal Affairs, and before that, she was a deputy in the Civil Rights Enforcement Section and the Environment Section. Toni has also held positions at the Department of Toxic Substances Control and as Assistant County Counsel for Ventura County. The interview will last about 30 minutes with some time at the end for questions and answers. So feel free to fill out the question cards on your seats and pass them to the end of the row where we will collect them after the interview. Now I present for the 2024 Fireside Chat, Suma Pisapati, Mike Leslie, and Lifetime Achievement Award winner, Toni Cordero.
As Gwen said, we met each other, I think, this month, maybe even last week, for the first time at the law school orientation, and I won't specify the number of years that was. But I've been really amazed with the arc of your career and all the different jobs you had, from starting a private practice, going through all the agency jobs and working for the AG's office. And one of the things that I'm interested in hearing from you about is that you worked in the Civil Rights Division, you worked in the environmental section of the AG's office, and that was before environmental justice really became a popular topic. And what prompted your interest in those two areas, and how have you been able to integrate those in terms of your interests and what you've been working on?
Thank you. So before I start, I just want to thank both Mike and Suma for agreeing to do this. I know you both have put in so much work and effort on this, so thank you so much. Mike, as you know, as you've already heard, is a longtime friend. Suma is a longtime, and what do I want to say, colleague and comrade in arms, working on environmental justice issues, so thank you both. So in answer to your question, Mike, when in the years kind of at the beginning of the early part of the 21st century, environmental justice, when I came back to the civil rights section of the California Attorney General's office, environmental justice was an issue, but it was really starting to be very hot. And agencies were finally starting to acknowledge that, perhaps maybe communities, low-income communities of color, weren't being treated as fairly as other communities, and just maybe some of their decision-making had something to do with that. So that was kind of a hot topic. But I looked around, and I saw that the people that were being called on as environmental justice, quote unquote, experts, or being hired in positions to be environmental justice coordinators, were not typically people of color. And I thought, we need to be in that space. We need to be part of the discussion and part of the of helping move environmental justice from rhetoric to reality. And so I just thought, well, so I wanted to be part of that. And I also, I had been in the environmental section of the Attorney General's office for 9.5 years. Before I even went to the Attorney General's office, I had been an extern, a fellow, and then a board member at the ACLU of Southern California. And then after I left the Attorney General's office and came back, I was in the civil rights section. Environmental justice is the confluence of environmental law and civil rights practice. So it just seemed like the perfect marriage there. And also, I had kind of always tried to have justice, not necessarily environmental justice, but even when I was at, when I was at the ACLU, when I was in the civil rights section, justice was always one of the things that I tried to include in my practice. I tried to keep as part of my practice. So it really wasn't a big step to go to environmental justice. So it was just something that kind of came naturally, I thought, anyway.
Thank you.
Toni, I'll try not to fangirl out a little too much, but I've been a great admirer of your work over the years, and also appreciate your partnership in moving diversity and environmental justice issues forward. You mentioned having worked at the AG's office, but you were very modest about it. As some or many of you may know, Toni was the highest ranking non-elected attorney in the AG's office under then Attorney General Javier Becerra. And that means that Toni was second only to the AG on issues of law. I imagine that you were also the first woman of color and the first Native American to occupy that role. So can you describe your journey to the highest echelon of state government? And can you share a little bit about some of the joys and some of the challenges along that journey?
Sure. Well, yes. So I was the highest ranking non-elected California attorney in the office. Yes, that's true. I got to oversee, and I really do say that I was privileged to oversee our entire legal division because any of you who've been here a while knows that every time any of the deputies from the AG's office, former deputies from the AG's office, talk about the office, we fawn over it because we all just think it was the best place in the world to ever work, and it really was. So I got to work with the smartest, best, most dedicated lawyers in the state, and as Chief of Legal Affairs, I really got to see just how broad that expertise extended because I got to move outside of the sections I had worked in before and see what was going on in the rest of the office. But to go back to your question, I don't know if I was the first person of color or the first Native woman. I strongly suspect I was. Most important thing is not to be the last. Right? And you don't even want to be, obviously in that position, but it's important. It's nice to be the first, but you want to make sure that you're not the last. You want to make sure that there are people coming after you. One of the great things, I don't know that this was unique because it was Javier's administration. I think it would have been true in any of the prior administrations as well. It wasn't really that big a deal. It didn't affect how I did my job. It didn't affect how people interacted with me. But it was a big deal in the sense that we know that it's true, that if you can see her, you can be her. So it's important to make sure that people can see folks like us in those positions. So that's the answer to that part of the question. In terms of how did I get to where I got, it was very serendipitous, to be honest. back at the early part of my career, I ended up in the Attorney General's office almost by accident because I had taken a job right after law school at a law firm, and I wasn't, that wasn't really what I wanted to do long term. So I was doing a lot of pro bono to sort of fill my own need to do something worthwhile. And one of the projects I was working on was a homeless advocacy project with the the LA County Bar Association, and one of the people who was working on that project with me was Gail Ruderman-Fior, who is now on the Court of Appeal. And some of you may know who her husband is, or her son. Anyway, she was working on this project with me, and she thought that I belonged in the environment section of the Attorney General's office. So she actually messengered over an application to my office. I see Jamie laughing. She actually did that, and said, hey, she said, just fill it out, send it in, and then after you filled it out and sent it in, we can talk about whether you really want to work here or not. So I did that, and I went and met all the people in the environment section in the LA office, and some of the people from the Sacramento office. And I mean, they were just, obviously, that was fantastic. I mean, it was the greatest group of people ever, people that anybody would, it would be a thrill to work with. And so that's how I ended up at the Attorney General's office. And I went to the environment section and absolutely fell in love with the practice of environmental law, which I hadn't really done up to that point. And so, I was working there. I told Mike and Suma, I would get calls from headhunters, and I would say, take me out of your Rolodex. Don't call me again. I'm happy where I am. You don't ever need to call me. And so I did that for 9.5 years, and then I left the office and eventually ended up being appointed as the chief counsel at DTSC up in Sacramento. But in 2003, the governor who appointed me got recalled. Some of you may remember that event. And I needed to find a new job. So I knew I didn't want to work for the new governor, and I doubt he would have wanted me to. So I contacted Rick Frank, who may be here. And if he wasn't, he was sitting right here last year. And said, hey, Rick, I'm going to be looking for a new job. If you hear of anything, please let me know. And he said, would you be interested in coming back to the Attorney General's office? He said, but I can't guarantee you can go back to the environment section. We really would like you to go to the civil rights enforcement section and do civil rights and environmental justice. It's like, okay. Okay, I think I could do that. And I said, can I do it in LA? He said, that's where we need someone. So that's how I ended up back in the Attorney General's office. And just as luck or the ancestors would have it, very shortly after I went back to the AG's office in the civil rights section, the woman who had been representing the Native American Heritage Commission left the section and left the office. And so I got assigned to represent the Native American Heritage Commission, which was really cool for a whole lot of reasons. They did some really interesting work, but also because it was the first time in their existence that they had been represented by a Native person from our office. It really did feel like the ancestors were at work there. And then I stayed there for a while, and for a long while, and left in 2016 or 2017, I think maybe the end of 2016, and went back to DTSC, just thinking I'm getting near the end of my career. I was, I think, 60 at that point, and decided, this is going to be my last chance to do something different if I'm ever going to do it before I retire. So I went back, but very shortly after I went back to DTSC, I was heading the hazardous waste management program. Kamala Harris got elected to the Senate, and Javier Becerra got appointed to her former job as AG, and he called me and asked me if I'd be interested in coming back to the AG's office. So that's how I ended up as Chief of Legal Affairs. So it's not exactly a path that I could recommend that everybody follow, because I'm not sure I could follow it again. But that was it. That's the path. And you asked about the joys. Well, I think I hit on some of them, on most of them. I mean, the biggest joy was people. Second biggest joy was the work. I mean, we got to do incredible work with incredible people. And I'm not kidding when I say that I got to work with the best lawyers in the state. there's no doubt. I mean, one of them is sitting right here. Well, actually, 3 of them are sitting right there. Jamie's got to be the expert on Coastal Commission work. Tim was my CEQA guru, and Susan was the state expert on air quality. So I just couldn't have asked for a better place to learn how to be a lawyer.
That raises some interesting topics, maybe for some of us looking back in our career, but also for younger lawyers who are just coming up and just maybe they're still in law school, maybe they're getting their first job. It's interesting that you started in private practice, and then people that you knew and met from a pro bono work, Gail, got you involved in the AG's office, and then, so it seems like you were sort of building on contacts, and so you say it was serendipity, but was it really serendipity, or was it really your contacts and the fact that you were learning as you went, and that you obviously impressed the people that you worked with?
Well, as they say, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. So I guess that's kind of what it was. It is also, as all of you in this audience I'm sure know, as much as it doesn't seem like it sometimes, it is a relatively small bar. So it's not, of environmental practitioners. So it's not easy to, it's not difficult to actually know and interact with the same people over and over again. But yeah, I'm not going to be that modest about it. You definitely do have to be good at what you do in order to be able to keep moving up and to be able to get people to recommend you. So yeah, maybe it wasn't all serendipity, but a lot of it was, and the reason I say that is because I think it is helpful to newer lawyers and younger lawyers, people coming in, to not think that you have to plan every step of your future and every step of your career. You need to be open to letting things happen that maybe you hadn't anticipated. I often say that if I had written the script for my life, I would have missed the best parts because it's not the things that I thought were going to happen or didn't necessarily happen, and the things that happened instead were pretty great.
I want to pick up on something you said. You mentioned preparation. Again, a very modest way of describing an incredibly impressive resume. And with that, impressive background and resume and your Stanford Law degree, you could have dominated really any legal arena. Yet you chose a life of public service. Can you tell us a little bit about what drew you to public service and what cases or issues resonated with you the most?
Yes, I'll talk about that, but what I want to dispel is this sort of subtle implication in your question that going into public service was a sacrifice. It absolutely was not. There's nothing I would have rather done with my career. So, no sacrifice at all to be in public service. And as I have said multiple times and will say for the rest of my life, working at the Attorney General's office was one of the greatest gifts I ever received. But also, the work that I did there allowed me, I could have made more money doing something else, but I got compensated so much better in so many other ways by working in the public sector. So I can drive down PCH past Solstice Canyon and see that it is still a canyon and not a country club and golf course, and I get to know that I had some role in that. There was a young woman who was a assistant fishing boat captain who got fired just coincidentally the day after she told her bosses that she was pregnant. Allegedly because they were downsizing and needed to cut back. Of course, after she was fired, they hired 3 different men to replace her, all with less experience and all at higher salaries. So we got to vindicate her rights. I got to help write a brief to the U.S. Supreme Court on behalf of a coalition of states supporting California, a series of laws that California passed trying to help Holocaust survivors and victims of Nazi-looted recover their family treasures. And even though, unfortunately, all of those laws went down at the Supreme Court, I really felt like it was a privilege to be able to just be on the right side and helping to fight those battles to vindicate something that felt like the right thing to do. So I didn't sacrifice anything going into public service, and I consider it a real privilege to have been able to do that. And I think that, I talked about what a great gift it was to be able to work with the people that I worked with, and really high among that was also being able to represent the Native American Heritage Commission. I guess I think I would say that was my greatest joy working, which is really hard to say because there were so many great things that we did. But working for the Native American Heritage Commission and helping to protect sacred sites was probably my greatest joy. And the biggest challenge was that I was representing the state and state agencies and not necessarily the specific communities. I wasn't, working as an advocate for a specific tribe or specific communities. But at the same time, Kamala Harris is so right when she says that there is nothing like standing up in court and saying, Antonette Cordero, on behalf of the people of the state of California.
Yeah, and you raise an interesting point, which is, especially since you've started to scale back your formal practice, you've gotten tremendously involved, even more so in indigenous rights and establishing liaison with all tribes up and down the coast and across the country, and even in New Zealand. And people may or may not know, although I think it's mentioned in your bio, that you were the chairwoman of the coastal band of the Chumash, and also have paddled across the Santa Barbara Straits in a native tomal, which was traditionally built and traditionally designed. And I wonder, in your background and also as you're really focusing on these issues, how do you see, your those native issues as interfacing with your love of environmental law?
Well, it's a little hard, kind of like asking me how being a woman would, that it's part and parcel of who I am, so I can't pull it out and say, if I wasn't, it would be different, because I don't know what it would be like. But certainly, having been raised, as a Native woman, or as a Native person, first of all, I grew up in my ancestral homelands. I'm very grateful to be able to say that. I know that not all Native people can say that. I was privileged to be able to grow up in my Native homelands. And so the places that I grew up in are the places that my ancestors also frequented, I assume. I spent a lot of time outdoors. I think that was probably as a result of my father's heritage, but my dad was definitely an outdoors person. We spent every summer of my childhood camping, sometimes to the point where we wanted to go home. But we spent every summer of my childhood camping, swimming in the ocean, in the rivers, catching pollywogs, running away from snakes, and just having a great life. And I think for most Native people, I know that there are issues in some spaces where people of color are not necessarily made to feel welcomed in the outdoors, or they are made to feel uncomfortable in the outdoors. But for Native people, it's so much a part of who we are, that's not an issue. So it was just really very much a part of who I am. So the fact that I'm Native probably influenced the fact that I grew up camping all the time, but I think it was the fact that I grew up camping all the time and being outdoors so much that made it, that kind of drew me into environmental law. But I have to say, going back to my first answer, I actually really wanted to be a civil rights attorney. And I became an environmental law because that's where Gail enticed me to go. But I went to the environment section thinking, I'm going to try this. I'm not sure I want to be an environmental attorney. I'm going to do this for a couple of years and see how I like it. And then even if I don't like it, I'll already be in the AG's office. And when there's an opening in the civil rights section, I can apply for it. Well, as I said, that lasted for about 2 weeks. And I was telling people, don't talk to me, I love my job. So, and even when I went back to the civil rights section, one of my colleagues used to always tease me because he said, "You've been here longer than you were in the in the environment section, and you still identify more with the environment section than you do with us," which is absolutely true. So I can't really tell you how much a part. I'm sure it played a big role. Certainly, it plays a role in my wanting to help my community and other tribes protect sacred sites. I think it helps me. I have maybe an understanding of how much that means to us. It's probably why helping Holocaust survivors reclaim their ancestral artifacts and art and links to their ancestors also resonated with me, because that's what we have to do. And you know, that I'm sure, I'm obviously being Native plays a big role in what draws me to that.
You mentioned some of the high impact, high profile issues and cases that you've worked on, and of course that meant having a robust Supreme Court practice. And so I'm wondering if you have some advice, especially for folks who are more early career and who are aspiring to a Supreme Court practice like yours. You know, what advice might you offer?
Sure. I mean, I don't want to overstate. I did do a lot of amicus briefs to the Supreme Court. I didn't represent as a party the Attorney General's office at the Supreme Court level, but I was able to write a lot of Supreme Court briefs, amicus briefs, and frequently for a coalition of states on, you know, hot topics like defending these statutes, but also on affirmative action. We went up on the Fisher case twice. And other cases. And so I would say, actually, no matter what you want to do in the practice of law, you need to be a good writer. So focus on writing. Doesn't matter what kind of law you want to practice, you need to be able to write well. And in order to be able to write well, you need to write. So write a lot. And also, in order to become a better writer, you need to be willing to be edited. So make sure that you are not a prima donna about your writing, to put it bluntly. Yeah. If you can't be edited, then you can't become a good writer, because you cannot improve your writing without being edited. I think by the time I started working on Supreme Court briefs, I'd been practicing for like 20 years. I was already a very good writer, but when I started working on Supreme Court briefs, I had to work a lot with our Solicitor General's office and with our Solicitor General, Manny Medeiros, who was known as a very heavy-handed editor. I loved working with him because I learned so much from him about how to make my writing more succinct, how to emphasize and de-emphasize, you know, the right issues, just how to really, 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 really focus on your audience. And Manny used to laugh at me because I think a lot of people in the office actually weren't that crazy about his editing, and I was always thanking him for helping me to become a better writer. So you got to be open to that, and then it helps to read good writing, which means don't read case opinions, don't read legislation. That's the worst writing you will ever read. Find somebody you know who's a good writer and read their briefs, or go online. I mean, I actually won one of these. The NAG, the National Association of Attorneys General, gives out awards every year for best brief. And you can go online and you can find them. Read those briefs.
Mm-hmm. You've been very involved, in addition to your vocation for avocation in bar associations. For example, the California Lawyers Association, formerly the State Bar Environmental Law Section. What got you involved in, let's say, the CLA Environmental Law Section, and how has that impacted your practice?
Oh, good question. That's a good question. So the way I got involved was actually, I think, some of the people right there, people who had, well, certainly Susan, Ken Alex, whom you may know, Cliff Rexhaven, former colleagues from the AG's office, and Margarita Padilla, and who were very active, already very active with CLA, who just decided that they thought I needed to be doing that too. And so they got me involved in working with and running for the executive committee. Well, one of the great things that those of you who aren't, maybe on the executive committee don't know is that you serve I can't remember if it's 2 or 3 year term on the executive committee, and then you become an advisor for life, basically. As long as you're willing to continue to work with the organization, they want you as an advisor. And I was just telling someone yesterday that one of the things that keeps me involved is that the executive committee will pretty much let you do whatever educational programs you want to do, as long as you're willing to do the work to organize them. You get to use the resources of California Lawyers Association to put on these programs. So whatever you think people need to hear about and that you find people want to hear about, you can put on these programs, and you get to all these resources to help publicize them and help put them on. So I was able to do that, and I was able to put on programs about environmental justice and diversity and tribal issues long before they were really that popular. Or that prevalent, I should say, maybe. Just because, like I said, CLA would back you up as long as you were willing to do the work. And still, it's still true, even for this conference. We still can propose, and as long as we propose panels and propose topics and get a lot of support for doing that, and we can help shape the kind of education legal education, MCLE, that we're bringing to our members. And one of the programs that I helped start was a program that we still occasionally do called Your Voice. Your Voice. And we started it as a program not for attorneys, but for the public to learn how to interact. And there are a number of environmental laws, as many of you know, that invite and in some cases rely on public input and public participation. But the public doesn't always know how to participate and how to best make use of those opportunities. So we started a program called Your Voice, which to help educate the public on how to participate in these environmental laws and environmental decision making. So yeah, that's really what drew me in. Is it just allowed me to do what I wanted to do and have the resources to do it.
And I guess a follow-up question on that is, given your longstanding work and affiliation with the environment section, what does this award from this section mean to you?
Well, that's hopefully obvious. Nobody, obviously, you should never do anything you do for recognition, because you will almost certainly be disappointed. And also, I always feel like if you have to tell people how great you are, then you're not as great as you think you are. But at the same time, from time to time, it is definitely, we all need a little dose of, external validation, right? And it's nice to know that the seeds that you plant actually do blossom and somebody notices that. And so, and especially for me, as I've said, even though I have done some other things, environmental law is what's most near and dear to my heart, and it's most near and dear to my self-identity. So to get an award from this organization is just, it's beyond words. So thank you all very much.
We have time for some Q&A and some questions if people would like to either pass up a card, or if you just want to raise your hand for a question, feel free. Toni is a tremendous resource and a wonderful person, as you can see. So she'd be happy to answer questions that you might have. Marilee is picking up some cards here.
And while questions are being gathered, I can start off by asking, or continue, I should say, by asking switching gears a little bit. and-
Before you do that,
Okay.
is it okay if I introduce a few VIPs in the audience?
Oh, of course.
Yes.
So first, I'd like to introduce my sister and brother-in-law, Annette and Chris, and my great nephew, who many of you have had the honor, the pleasure of meeting already, Spencer in the back, and the tribal chair of the Mono Lake Kutsadaka tribe, Charlotte Lang. The tribal chair of the Southern Sierra Miwok, Sandra Chapman. Thank you both for being here. Thank you all for being here.
Yeah, so I just wanted to switch gears a little bit and maybe touch upon, well, I guess to preface the question, when someone like you has dedicated so much time and energy to their career, the struggle is often, what about the rest of your identity, right? What about the rest of your life? Like how, I guess the term of the age is, work-life balance. But, I really see it as, how to be a whole human being, how to be fully actualized. And so, do you have advice for folks, especially when you're so passionate about what you do?
Well, that is the advice, is do something that you're passionate about. So you don't feel like you're leaving the rest of your life behind while you do your work. The work that I'm doing is, in many ways, the rest of my life. It dovetails very closely in with what I actually do in my quote-unquote free time. The work that I do with my tribe very closely aligns with the work that I did for the Native American Heritage Commission, or that I do here, and trying to help bring tribal voices into the conference. So you really can help sort of alleviate that problem of feeling like you're leaving the rest of your life behind if what you're doing actually meshes with what you would be doing anyway, even if you weren't being paid to do it.
One of the questions that we got from the audience is, can you talk about the special place California plays in environmental law?
Oh, well, I think we all can, right? I mean, that's why we're here. It's great. It's great to be from California. Well, first of all, that I have to just say that. Especially for I think for all of us who are have the privilege of living in California, but especially for those of us who have been here since time immemorial, this is home. This is home more so than I probably identify more as a Californian than I do as an American. So definitely there's that. But California is a leader, and as working for the state, I take real pride in. I think we all at the AG's office, and any of us who work for the state, take real pride in the fact that we are at the forefront of moving environmental issues forward and addressing them and being creative about how we address them. And we need to make sure we keep that going. We can't rest on our laurels. But yeah, I think that's important. California, we have obviously different challenges because we have not only a large state, but an enormous population that a lot of other states don't have to contend with. And that presents some challenges for protecting environmental resources and for managing different places, and even just Yosemite. I mean, I was talking with my nephew about this. Probably there are more visitors who come to Yosemite in a year than there are who go to some states in a year. And so the challenges of how we manage that are pretty great and very different from what other states might face and present maybe harder challenges. But California's just done such a great job. We're so lucky to have a state that is at least environmentally conscious and that has environment as such a high priority.
This is another question from the audience. You may want to take the fifth on this, but who was your favorite AG and why?
If it wasn't for the fact that I went to school with Javier, I would take the fifth. But I can say without worry that it's Javier. I've known Javier for a very long time. We went, we were kids, basically. We were baby lawyers together. He was actually at the Attorney General's office when I joined the Attorney General's office, and one of the people who persuaded me to go there. He also was, Javier. He was so Javier, advising me on how to pay off my mortgage early, advising me on what my duties were as a pet owner. So yeah, it would definitely be Javier.
I think we've ended our time here for Q&A, but I know you wanted to introduce your special guests.
Oh,
Who,
yes, thank you.
Go ahead.
So I introduced our two tribal chairs here, and I just wanted to ask them, they wanted to say something. I wanted to invite you up to say something if you'd like.
I think I can speak. You're older, go first. I respect my elder.
I just want to say it's a real honor to be here, and that everything that you have put your life into, helping our communities, helping our tribes, that means so much, because being non-federally recognized, we get overlooked. And so to have somebody that you have came up to this tier, it's just amazing. And I thank you so much. And I'm so glad that our paths have crossed. And I'm so honored to be here for this great day. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Good save.
I'm gonna get.
Yes, I was very fortunate in this short sisterhood that we have. I got invited to come on the Tamil, and what an overwhelming experience for me. And I was standing there and walking, and I had a little bit of a leg issue, but I got down there. But when I saw the boat coming and just kept going back and forth, I just started getting anxiety and chills and like, gosh, I'm part of this tribe. I'm coming home. And when those paddles went up, I just started crying. I mean, inside myself. Couldn't let anybody see I was a wimp, but it was so powerful. And I really want to thank you for that, saying I was part family now. And us Indian people, just little things like that mean a lot in our communities. And when you talk about passion, I taught preschool for 20 years. And then I went to a little bit different of the Attorney General's office. I went to juvenile hall because I wanted to know why all our Indian kids were getting violated and the non-Indian kids were let go. So I thought, well, maybe I can get in there and maybe change some things and get our kids more positive. And the one thing I did, and you said passion, was I got the kids graduated out of high school. So that's, and thank you for those powerful words, Toni. Our friendship, our family, our life together will be forever. And hopefully we have a few years left. But on behalf of the 7 tribes, we'd like to give you a little gift.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I think it's time to wrap up now. So can we give a big thank you to Suma, Mike, and of course Toni. We really appreciate the work the panel put into this year, and you in the audience for being so attentive and enthusiastic. We hope to see you at the reception in the lobby and at the banquet where you will hear from Toni's colleagues and Toni herself. So please join us again in thanking the panel.